There is a version of Switzerland that everyone already owns. The mountains, white at the top, the lake, still as glass. The train that leaves at 9:04 and arrives at 9:04. The chocolate, the watch, the bank. It is the postcard the world agreed on. And the numbers do not argue with it. Ranking after ranking places this country at or near the very top. First in the world for quality of life. 1 resident in 7 is a millionaire. The trains run on time more than 96 times out of 100. Unemployment sits near 3%. There is no oil here, no gold in the ground, no coastline. 60% of the country stands on end. And still, it became one of the richest places a human being can be born. It is the kind of perfection that makes a person suspicious, because nothing is this clean by accident. So look closer at the postcard, the chalet with the flower boxes, the tidy village. Go down the stairs, past the wine and the bicycles, and you reach a door. It is steel. It is 30 centimeters thick. Behind it is a room built to survive a nuclear war. There is one of these for almost every person in the country. 9 million spaces, underground, waiting. The Swiss did not build that out of fear. They built it out of habit. And there is another thing the postcard leaves out. This model democracy, the one the world holds up as the example, did not let its women vote. Not in some distant century, within living memory. A grandmother in this country can remember being told the ballot was not for her. So here is the question. It is not whether Switzerland is as good as it looks. It is. The question is what it cost to make it that way. And who paid? This is Switzerland. To understand how it was built, you have to begin at a field. It is small, above a lake in the center of the country, ringed by the kind of mountains that keep armies out. The Rutli. The Swiss will tell you their nation began here, and they will give you a date. The 1st of August, 1291. The story goes like this. 3 valleys, Uri, Schwyz, Unterwalden, meet in secret. Foreign lords are pressing in from the north. The men swear an oath. They will answer to no outside judge. They will stand for one another. A confederation is born, not from a king, but from a handshake between farmers. It is a good story. Most of it may not be true. There was a charter in 1291. It still exists, a slip of aging parchment, kept now behind glass. But it was one of dozens of such pacts in those mountains, no more special at the time than a lease. The men who signed were not humble shepherds. They were the local aristocracy, guarding a trade route. And the archer, the one who shot the apple from his son's head, who lit the spark of freedom, William Tell. There is no evidence he ever lived. Here is the stranger fact. Switzerland knows this. The country did not celebrate the 1st of August until 1891, 600 years later. A young nation, only decades old, decided it needed a longer past. So it chose one. It reached back, picked a document, picked a day, and built a birthday around them. Few countries invent their own origins so openly. fewer still admit it. But hold on to that. A place that assembled itself on purpose, because almost everything that followed was chosen the same way. What came after the field was not peace, it was war for 200 years. The little confederation fought. At Morgarten in 1315, mountain men ambushed an army of Austrian knights on a narrow shore and destroyed it. At Sempak in 1386, they broke the Habsburgs again. Country by country, the Swiss earned a name across Europe, the most feared infantry on the continent. And then they sold it. For generations, Swiss mercenaries were Europe's soldiers for hire. Kings and popes paid for them. To be Swiss, for a time, meant to fight other people's wars for money, because the mountains grew little else worth selling. September 1515. On a plain outside Milan, at a place called Marignano, the Swiss meet the army of the French king. For 2 days, they hold. On the third, the French cannon and cavalry break them. 10,000 of them lie dead on the field. It is the defeat that changes everything. Standing among the dead at Marignano, the Confederation makes a decision that will define it for the next 500 years. It will stop. It will stop reaching outward, stop selling its sons, stop taking sides. It will turn inward and be neutral. Neutrality, the thing the world now thinks of as Switzerland's soul, did not begin as a philosophy. It began as a wound. A country that had bled enough deciding on a battlefield that it was done. The great powers made it official in 1815 at the Congress of Vienna. Switzerland would be permanently neutral, its borders guaranteed. And still, even then, the country was not yet the calm thing on the postcard. As late as 1847, the Swiss fought each other. Catholic cantons against Protestant in a short, sharp civil war. It was only after that, in 1848, that the modern country was finally written down. A constitution, a federal state. The Switzerland the world admires is younger than it looks. It is not ancient, it is built and recent, and it was fought for right up to the edge of living memory. The land itself keeps its own residents. High on the slopes above the last trees, the ground whistles. A sharp note cutting the air, and then another answering from across the valley. The alpine marmot. A ground squirrel the size of a cat, fat with the summer, standing upright at the mouth of its burrow. It spends half its life asleep, 6 months underground, curled below the frost line, its heartbeat slowing to a few beats a minute while the snow buries the world above. It survives the winter by refusing to be in it. When the whistle sounds, every marmot on the slope drops into the earth at once. A shared alarm, a whole colony, each animal a lookout for the rest. It is the oldest Swiss instinct there is. Watch the horizon. Keep a way down. Look after your own. The country's real capital is a town most of the world could not name. Not Zurich, not Geneva, Bern. A bend in a green river, a city of stone arcades where the medieval clock still turns, and the bears the city is named for still live in a park by the water. Switzerland does not have a president the way other countries do. It has 7. A council of 7 people who run the country together, and each year, one of them wears the title of president for 12 months. A post so quiet that most Swiss cannot tell you offhand who holds it. Power here is deliberately dull, spread thin, passed around so that no single hand can ever close on it. It was in this unhurried town in 1905 that a young man failed his way into history. His name was Albert Einstein. He could not get a university post, so he took a job at the Bern Patent Office, third class, reviewing other people's inventions at a wooden desk. And in the margins of that year, in his spare hours, he wrote a handful of papers. One explained the nature of light. One proved that atoms were real. One rewrote time and space themselves. A clerk in a quiet town remade the universe on his lunch breaks, and the country simply let him. That is a kind of genius Switzerland has always been good at. Not making the thing, making the room where the thing can happen. Unbothered, unwatched. Remember that. The gift of being left alone. It runs through everything here, the good and the rest. Follow the country south, and the language in people's mouths changes. In Bern, they speak German, or a Swiss German so distinct that Germans need subtitles. Cross a range of mountains, and it becomes French. Cross another, and the road signs turn Italian. The air warms, and palm trees appear on the shores of the lakes. And in one high valley in the east, 40,000 people still speak Romansh, a language descended directly from the Latin of Roman soldiers, spoken almost nowhere else on Earth.
4 languages.
1 country. No shared tongue at all. By every rule of history, this should not hold. It should have split. The French west drifting toward France, the Italian south toward Italy, the German north pulled into Germany. Nations have shattered over far less than a border of language. It holds because the Swiss decided that it would. They have a word for what they are, a Willens nation, a nation of will, not a people bound by blood or language or faith, but by a choice, renewed constantly, to remain one thing. The glue is not what they share. The glue is the agreement to stay. And so the country runs on voting, not once every few years, several times a year, on almost everything. A Swiss citizen may be asked at the ballot whether to change the constitution, whether to buy new fighter jets, how immigration should work. Gather 50,000 signatures and you can force the entire country to vote on nearly any question you like. It is the most direct democracy on the planet. The people do not elect rulers to decide for them. They decide. They have voted on things almost no other country would dare put to its own people. Whether to ban the building of minarets, whether to give every citizen a guaranteed income simply for being alive, whether to abolish the army altogether. And most of the boldest ideas, the Swiss vote down, carefully, deliberately, choosing caution again and again. It is why the country crept so slowly toward the modern world. Switzerland did not join the United Nations until 2002, one of the very last nations on Earth to do so. It has never joined the European Union that surrounds it on every side. A nation of will can will itself to wait, sometimes for generations. It is slow, it is careful, it almost never lurches, and it would produce, as we will see, one of the longest and strangest silences in the country's history. But first, how a nation with nothing under the ground made itself rich. The answer is in the hands. In the high, cold valleys of the Jura, in the long winters when the farms were buried, families turned to the workbench. They made watches, the smallest, most precise machines a person could build by hand, hundreds of parts the size of a grain of sand, fitted so exactly that the finished thing could measure a second for a lifetime and not drift. A whole region taught itself to work at a scale you almost cannot see. That is the Swiss character in miniature: patience, precision, the willingness to spend a winter on a mechanism no one will ever open. That patience nearly killed them. In the 1970s, a cheaper idea arrived from abroad: the quartz watch, kept in time by a battery and a sliver of crystal, accurate and almost free to make. Within a decade, the great Swiss workshops were closing. Tens of thousands lost their trade. The country that owned time was about to be undone by it. So Switzerland did the thing it always does. It reinvented instead of surrendering. It answered the cheap plastic watch with one of its own: the Swatch, bright and disposable and Swiss. And it turned the old mechanical watch into something else entirely. Not a tool for telling time, but a small, worn declaration of wealth and patience. The industry did not merely survive, it came back richer than before. They did the same with milk. A country of mountain cows and too much cream turned it into chocolate. And in 1875, in a Swiss workshop, a man named Daniel Peter solved the problem that had defeated everyone before him. He found a way to fold milk into chocolate without it spoiling, using condensed milk from a neighbor named Henri Nestlé. Milk chocolate, the thing half the world now craves, was a Swiss engineering solution to a dairy surplus. And the cheese, Gruyère, aged in cellars for months. Emmental, with its famous holes that are not decoration, but the fingerprints of the bacteria that ripen it, each bubble a pocket of gas left behind by something alive. No empire, no colonies, no mine. Switzerland grew wealthy by being better than anyone else at the small, exact, patient thing. It sold the world its trust, one perfect object at a time. Then, there are the mountains everyone actually came for. The high Alps of the Valais, a wall of rock and ice along the southern border, where the Matterhorn stands alone against the sky in the shape the whole world knows. The shape pressed into a triangle of chocolate.
These peaks look eternal.
Untouched. They are neither. Beneath the ice sit some of the largest dams in Europe, holding back green lakes of meltwater, turning the sheer weight of the mountains into electricity. And the water does not stop at the border. These same peaks are the source of a continent. The Rhine that reaches the North Sea, the Rhone that empties into the Mediterranean, both begin as ice on these Swiss slopes. A country you could drive across in a day quietly feeds the great rivers of half of Europe. The water tower of a continent, standing in the very middle of it. The wildness you are looking at is measured, monitored, engineered to the centimeter. Even the animals on these slopes are, in a sense, put there on purpose. And even the beauty keeps a body count. In 1865, a young Englishman named Edward Whymper became the first person to stand on the summit of the Matterhorn after years of failed attempts on its ridges. On the way down, a rope snapped. 4 of his 7 companions fell, down the north face, out of sight, gone in an instant. The mountain that now sells the country to the world was christened, on the very day it was conquered, with the deaths of the men who conquered it. Switzerland learned the lesson early. The mountains that draw the world in are the same mountains that kill it. And so the country learned to manage them, to rope them, tunnel them, map every crevasse, post every warning, until the danger quietly became a view. Consider the ibex, A wild mountain goat, heavy-shouldered, with horns that curve back nearly a meter, standing on ledges no other large animal would attempt. The Swiss call it the King of the Alps. It is on the flag of an entire canton. And by the end of the 19th century, there was not a single one left in Switzerland. Every last one had been shot. Their horns were ground into powder and sold as medicine, their bodies rendered for cures. A country hunted its own emblem into nothing. So the Swiss stole it back. By then, ibex survived in only one place, a royal hunting reserve in Italy, guarded by the king himself. Switzerland asked for breeding animals. The king refused. So Swiss and Italian poachers carried young ibex out of the reserve by hand, over the mountains, across the border, one kid at a time. From those smuggled animals, the herds returned. Today, there are tens of thousands of ibex on these peaks. Every one of them descends from an act of quiet theft. Keep that near you as well. In this country, what gets erased does not always stay erased. Sometimes, decades later, someone goes and brings it back. The same slopes once held a great vulture, shot to the last bird on a rumor. We will come back to it. There is life here that even the climbers never see. On the bare surface of the glaciers, the blinding, empty ice, where nothing should be able to live, something moves. A dark speck against the white, hopping. The glacier flea, a springtail barely 2 millimeters long that spends its whole life on ice. It carries a kind of antifreeze in its body, proteins that stop its blood from turning to crystal. It stays active at temperatures that would kill almost anything else, feeding on pollen and bacteria carried up from the valleys on the wind. Bring a warm hand too close, and it can die of the heat of a single fingertip. It asks for nothing the mountain does not already give. And as the glaciers thin and retreat up the slopes, its entire world retreats with them. A creature perfectly at home in the one place that is vanishing. It is worth asking where the postcard itself came from, because someone had to invent it. For most of human history, mountains were not beautiful. They were obstacles, cold, dangerous, full of demons and bad weather. Places you crossed only when you had no choice. Then, in the 18th and 19th centuries, that changed, and it changed largely here. Poets and painters came to the Swiss lakes, looked up, and decided the Alps were sublime. The British came next in numbers, and all but invented the idea of the mountain holiday. A town like Lucerne, on its still lake beneath Mount Pilatus, its wooden chapel bridge crossing the water since the 14th century, became one of the first places on Earth built simply to be looked at. And in 1864, in the high village of St. Moritz, a hotelier made a bet with his summer guests that they would love the Alps even in winter, and won it. Winter tourism, the whole idea of the snow holiday, was born from a wager. The Swiss noticed all of it. They built railways up impossible slopes, grand hotels on the cliffs, cog trains to the summits. They took the thing that had always frightened people and sold it back to them as peace. The postcard was not found. It was manufactured, as carefully as a watch. Switzerland's greatest export may simply be the image of Switzerland. To see how the democracy truly works, go to Appenzell, a small canton in the green eastern hills, known for its painted houses and its cheese. Once a year, its citizens do not vote by machine or by post. They walk to the town square. They stand together in the open air, thousands of them, and they vote by raising their hands. A show of hands, counted by eye, the Landsgemeinde, direct democracy in its oldest, purest form, a whole community deciding its own laws while standing shoulder to shoulder under the sky. It is a genuinely moving thing to watch. It is also where the country's proudest idea collided with its slowest one. Because for most of the 20th century, the only hands raised in that square were men's. Switzerland did not give women the national vote until 1971. Not 1871, 1971, long after nearly every other country in Europe. The men had to vote to allow it, and the first time they were asked, in 1959, 2/3 of them said no. When it finally passed, one canton still would not comply. Appenzell-Innerrhoden. Its men stood in that same beautiful square and voted, again and again, to keep the women of their own valley silent. They were still refusing in 1990. In the end, it did not come from a change of heart. The country's highest court had to force it. In 1990, the judges ruled that a canton could not go on denying half its people a voice. The following spring, for the first time, the women of Appenzell walked into the square and raised their hands. Let that sit for a moment. The model democracy, the example the world still points to. And a woman there could not vote on her own village's affairs until she was old enough to be a grandmother. The perfection is real. It is also very, very recent. And yet, this same country gave the world one of its few genuinely good ideas. For that, go to Geneva, a French-speaking city at the far western tip of the country, wrapped around the end of a long blue lake. A city of diplomats and clocks and very quiet money. It has always been a serious place. 5 centuries ago, it was the capital of a revolution of the soul, the city where John Calvin built the strictest kind of Protestantism, a place so austere the rest of Europe called it the Protestant Rome. Discipline, restraint, the conviction that idleness is a sin and that everything should be accounted for. That spirit never fully left. You can still feel it in the tidiness, in the discretion, in the sense that here, someone is always keeping the books. And it was from Geneva that the world's conscience was written, by a businessman who took a wrong turn into hell. June 1859. A man from Geneva named Henri Dunant is traveling into northern Italy, chasing a business deal. He is 31. He wants a permit from the French emperor, and he means to ask him in person. Instead, he arrives at a place called Solferino on the evening of a battle. 40,000 men lie in the fields, wounded, dying, abandoned. There are almost no doctors. The armies have marched on and left them where they fell, to die of thirst and infection under the sun. Dunant never reaches the emperor. He stays. For days he gathers the local women, and together they carry water, bind wounds, and tend soldiers of every side without asking which uniform they wore. Tutti fratelli, the women say as they work, all brothers. He goes home to Geneva and cannot forget it. He writes a book about what he saw, and at the end of it, he asks a question no one had answered. What if every country trained volunteers in peacetime to care for the wounded of any army? What if there were a law that made the medics themselves untouchable? In 1863, in Geneva, a committee of 5 men takes up his idea. The next year, 12 nations sign the first Geneva Convention. An organization is born that still carries the wounded out of war zones today. And for its symbol, they chose the simplest thing they had. They took the Swiss flag, a white cross on red, and they reversed it, a red cross on white. The banner of the small neutral country turned inside out became the mark of mercy on battlefields across the world. Dunant himself did not end well. His business collapsed. He went bankrupt, was pushed out of the very committee he had founded, and disappeared into poverty for decades, forgotten, living out his years in a village hospice. Only near the end did the world remember him. In 1901, he was given the first Nobel Peace Prize ever awarded. He gave nearly all of it away and died a few years later, alone. The country made the world's conscience. It did not take care of the man who made it. Geneva never let the idea go. Today, the city holds the headquarters of the Red Cross and much of the United Nations, and rooms where enemies still come to sit at the same table. A small city in a small country, where the world goes when it needs neutral ground. And Switzerland is full of these outsized things. Zermatt, where no cars are allowed, and the Matterhorn watches over the streets. The steep terraced vineyards of Lavaux above Lake Geneva, walls of stone built by monks 800 years ago and now guarded by the world as a treasure. In Rome, the Pope is still protected by Swiss soldiers, as he has been for over 500 years. Neutral men in striped uniforms standing watch over the holiest ground in the Catholic world. In Basel, on the Rhine, quiet laboratories make a large share of the medicine the planet swallows, and along that river runs the only thread of water tying this landlocked country to the open sea. From a nation with no coast at all, the Rhine carries Swiss goods north to the ocean, and stranger still, the largest container shipping line on Earth is run from these mountains, moving cargo across oceans it can only reach on a map. And beneath the fields near Geneva runs a ring 27 kilometers around, where physicists collide particles to find the pieces the universe is built from. High in the passes, there is an older kind of rescue. For 1,000 years, monks kept a hospice at the great St. Bernard Pass, and they kept dogs, barrel-chested, thick-coated, bred to find travelers buried in the snow. One of them, a dog named Barry, is said to have saved more than 40 lives before he died. The breed still carries the name of that pass, a country that turned even its most lethal mountains into a place where strangers are dug out alive. A land the size of a large forest, holding the world's medicine, the world's money, the world's peace talks, its lost travelers, and a machine built to study the first instant of everything. And it all runs on time because the Swiss made the mountains obey. The Gotthard was making this country rich long before there was a country. It is the great gap in the Alps, the pass that lets the trade of northern Europe reach Italy and the sea beyond. For centuries, whoever held it grew wealthy on the tolls, the goods, the endless traffic of a continent squeezing through a single mountain gate. It was worth building a bridge across a gorge so deep and so violent that the legend said only the devil himself could have raised it. The early Confederation sat astride that route, and it grew strong on it. Control the gap in the mountains, and Europe pays you simply to pass. Beneath the Gotthard Massif, at the country's heart, they drilled the longest railway tunnel on Earth. 57 kilometers straight through the roots of the Alps, more than 2 kilometers of rock overhead. It took 17 years. When it opened, a train could pass under the mountains that once took armies a week to cross, and arrive, as Swiss trains do, within a minute or two of when it promised.
That is the surface of Switzerland.
Punctual, engineered, serene. But the same mountain that holds that tunnel holds something else, and to see the other Switzerland, you have to go into the rock. Return to that steel door beneath the house. Switzerland calls itself neutral, and it has not fought a foreign war in over 200 years. But neutrality here has never meant defenselessness. It has meant the opposite. A country that intends to stay out of every war must be ready, alone, for all of them. So the Swiss made their whole nation a fortress, not with a great standing army, with everyone. Nearly every man is trained as a soldier and sent home with his rifle. For generations, the weapon in the closet was a civic duty, not a fear. To this day, the country holds enormous public shooting festivals, tens of thousands of ordinary people, families, teenagers, gathering to fire at distant targets as a kind of national pastime. It is among the largest shooting events anywhere in the world. And it is not aggression, it is ritual. A peaceful country rehearsing together how it would defend itself, the way the marmot practices its whistle. And into the mountains themselves, they built the rest. The Gotthard again. Look at those mountainsides and you see rock. Look closer and the rock has doors, windows that are gun ports, whole fortresses hollowed into the peaks, barracks, hospitals, command rooms, kilometers of tunnel, hidden behind stone, painted to look like more stone. Some have been opened now, the war they were built for having never come. One is a museum inside a mountain. Another is a hotel, its rooms carved from a bunker beneath the Gotthard, guests sleeping where soldiers once waited for an invasion that never arrived. This is the other Swiss instinct, the twin of the marmots. Present a calm face. Prepare in secret for the end of the world. Every chalet, a house above, and a shelter below. The postcard on the surface, the fortress underneath. They were never two contradicting countries, these Switzerlands. They were always the same one. And the wild is returning to that fortress too. For a century, the large predators were gone. The lynx, the wolf, the bear, all hunted out of the Alps by people who wanted the mountains tamed. The forests fell silent. And then, slowly, the animals began to come back. The lynx was returned by hand, released into the forests in 1971. Now, more than 100 of them move unseen through the trees. A cat the size of a large dog, with tufted ears and a patient stare, almost never glimpsed by the people who share the woods with it. The wolves came back on their own, walking in over the mountains from Italy, uninvited. The bears are testing the edges. It unsettles people. A country this ordered is not sure how it feels about wolves. There are votes about them, of course. This is Switzerland. But the animals keep coming, indifferent to the ballot. The wild does not ask permission to return. It waits for the room, and then it fills it. On the steep grass between the cliffs moves the chamois, smaller and quicker than the ibex, a slight, nimble creature of the high slopes, climbing up the mountain in summer and dropping down it in winter, always just out of reach. For the hunters of these valleys, it was both the great prize and the great teacher. To follow a chamois was to learn the mountain itself. It is still here, still crossing ground that would stop a person cold. Above it all turns the golden eagle, a bird with a wingspan of more than 2 meters, riding the warm air that rises off the valleys, its eyesight sharp enough to pick a hair from a kilometer away. It holds a territory of 100 square kilometers and shares it with a single mate for life. Where the eagle circles, the mountain is whole again. Predator and prey, the full machine of the place, running as it did before people tried to empty it. There is a children's story the whole world knows about this country. A little girl sent to live in the mountains, goats and a grandfather and meadows. Heidi, the image of a Swiss childhood, barefoot, free, happy in the high grass. Look again at that barefoot child. In the real Switzerland, for more than a century, a barefoot child on a farm often meant something very different. They were called Verdingkinder, contract children. If a family was too poor, or a mother unmarried, or a household simply judged unfit by the authorities, the children could be taken away. And then they were placed, not in homes, but with farmers who needed cheap hands. In some villages, they were auctioned. The people gathered in the square, and the child went to whoever asked the least money from the state to take him. A reverse auction. The lowest bid won a human being. What happened next depended entirely on where a child landed. Some were treated as family, many were not. They ate apart, in sheds, with their backs to the table. They worked before school and after it, if they were sent to school at all. They were beaten. Some suffered worse. One woman remembered being told, "You eat too much. You are not giving a good return." This was not the 17th century. This was a wealthy, modern, democratic country, and it did not fully stop until the 1970s. More than 100,000 children passed through this system, and others tied to it. Children taken from traveling Yenish families under a program that ran until 1973, and, in some cases, people sterilized without consent. The farmers profited. The state saved money. And almost no one spoke of it because everyone in the village had quietly agreed not to see. Switzerland did not formally apologize to these people until 2013. Many of those it apologized to were by then very old. Many more were already dead. Let that stand without comfort. There is no rescue at the end of this one, only that, at last, the country said the word out loud. Every winter, the most powerful people alive fly into a small Swiss mountain town. Davos, a resort high in the Eastern Alps, once famous for its clean air and its sanatoriums, where the sick once came simply to breathe. Now, for 1 week a year, it fills with presidents and billionaires and the people who advise them, deciding the shape of the world behind snow and security fences. It is worth asking why they come here, why Switzerland, again and again, is the room where power meets. The answer is the thing this whole country is quietly built on: discretion. The Swiss will host you, and they will not ask, and they will not tell. It is the same instinct that let a patent clerk rewrite physics, unbothered in Bern. It is the same instinct that makes this the place the world comes to store what it would rather no one saw. And a country that keeps secrets well will, sooner or later, be asked to keep the wrong ones. The discretion is not only in Davos, it is in the small, quiet cantons where the tax is low and the questions are few. From Swiss towns most travelers never bother to visit, a handful of firms move a staggering share of the world's oil, its grain, its metals, the raw traffic of the whole planet, brokered behind alpine windows. 1 resident in 7 a millionaire. The wealth is real, and a great deal of it flows through rooms the world is never invited to see. A country this good at not asking questions will, in the end, be handed a question it should have asked. That is the last door in the basement, the deepest one. And to open it, you have to go back to a law that was written at first to do something good. Zurich, the largest city in the country, and its true heart, not of government, but of money. A clean city on a clean lake, its main street lined with the discreet doorways of private banks, and beneath that street, it is said, more gold than almost anywhere on Earth. It was here, 5 centuries ago, that another stern reformer, Huldrych Zwingli, stripped the churches bare and pressed thrift as a virtue. The vaults came much later, but the instinct was old. Keep, account, say nothing.
1934.
Swiss banks pass a law making it a crime, a real prosecutable crime, to reveal who owns an account. Banking secrecy written into the code of the nation. At the time, there was a mercy in it. In Germany, next door, a new regime was seizing the wealth of its Jewish citizens. A secret Swiss account was a way to hide money from the Nazis, to keep it out of their reach. The law was, in part, a shield for the persecuted. But a shield does not choose who stands behind it. As the war came, the same secrecy that hid money from the Nazis began instead to serve them. Germany was looting. As its armies took Europe, they emptied the vaults of the countries they occupied, the gold reserves of Belgium, of the Netherlands, of others. And they took gold from people, from the possessions of the murdered. That gold had a problem. It was known to be stolen, and stolen German gold was refused across the world. It could not easily be spent. So it was melted, recast into clean bars, stamped with older dates, and carried across one border, into Switzerland. Switzerland's National Bank took it. Over the course of the war, it accepted around $440 million in gold from Nazi Germany, worth billions today. More than half of it was looted. In return, Switzerland gave Germany what it truly needed: Swiss francs, the one neutral currency the world would still accept. Money to buy the materials that kept the war machine running. Historians would later say it plainly: without the Swiss banks, Germany would have run short of the hard currency it needed to fight on. The quiet, neutral country in the mountains helped fund the war it claimed to stand apart from. And there was a colder cruelty closer to home. Many Jewish families, before the worst, had done the careful thing. They had placed their savings in Switzerland for safekeeping. Then they were murdered. After the war, their heirs came to the Swiss banks to claim what was theirs, and were asked to produce a death certificate. There were no death certificates. The camps did not issue them. The banks understood this, and so, for decades, the money simply stayed in the vault, unclaimed, drawing quietly on itself, belonging, as far as the bank would admit, to no one at all. For 50 years, Switzerland did not look. The postcard held. The story of the brave little neutral country held. And then, one night in 1997, a security guard makes his rounds. His name is Christoph Meili. He works the night shift at one of the largest banks in Zurich. Passing through a room, he sees 2 carts standing by a shredder loaded with old ledgers, records from the war years. He is not supposed to touch them. He stops. He looks. He understands what he is looking at. He takes them. He walks the wartime records out of the bank, under his coat, and puts them into the hands of people who will make them public. For this, Switzerland turns on him. He has broken the sacred law, banking secrecy. He is fired. He is threatened with prosecution. In the country that built its fortune on discretion, the one man who broke the silence has to run. He takes his family to America and asks for asylum. A Swiss citizen seeking refuge from Switzerland. But the door was open now, and it would not close again. The pressure came from every direction at once: lawsuits, investigations, a commission that finally counted the gold and named what it was: and found that the bank's own board had known early that it was handling loot. In 1998, the Swiss banks agreed to a settlement of around $1.25 billion for the victims and their heirs. No sum was ever going to be the right one. It was not justice. It was an account, very late, being partly settled. And this is where the whole postcard finally turns over in your hands. The wealth that built the paradise, the vaults, the stability, the discretion that still draws the money of the world into these mountains, is the same wealth that, in the century's darkest hour, could not tell the difference between sheltering the hunted and banking for the hunters. The neutrality that keeps Switzerland clean is the same neutrality that let it profit from a war it refused to name. That is what it means to feel too good to be real. Not that the good is false, the good is real. It is that the same instincts built both halves, and the country spent 50 years choosing not to look at the second. So return, one last time, to the high slopes, to the vulture we left there. The bearded vulture, the largest bird in the Alps, with a wingspan approaching 3 meters, a scavenger that lives almost entirely on bone, dropping them from a height to shatter them on the rocks. For centuries, people told a lie about it, that it stole lambs, that it carried off children, and so they hunted it and poisoned it and shot it until by the early 20th century, the last one was gone. The king of the Alps erased on a rumor. And then, exactly as it did with the ibex, the country went and brought it back. Starting in 1991, in a national park in the Eastern Alps, young vultures raised in captivity were carried up to the cliffs and set free. It was slow. These are birds that take nearly a decade to breed and raise a single chick a year. But they held. Today, there are around 450 of them across the Alps, riding the same air the eagles ride, wild-born chicks fledging each spring from ledges where their kind had not been seen in 100 years. The lie took a single generation to kill the bird. The truth took a century to bring it back. That is the arithmetic of this country, written in feathers and bone. How quickly a rumor or a silence can erase a thing, and how long, how patiently, how expensively you have to work to undo it. It is the pattern of the whole country, written in a single bird. Something true is buried on a lie or on a silence. And then, long afterward, too late for many, but not for everything, someone decides to dig it back up. This is what Switzerland is, beneath the postcard. Not a paradise that fell from the sky, a thing that was assembled, on purpose, out of hard choices. A nation that chose its own birthday, chose its neutrality on a field of its own dead, chose to hold 4 languages together by will alone. A country good enough to invent the world's mercy, and human enough to bank the world's cruelty, sometimes in the same lifetime. The perfection is real, and it is recent, and it was paid for, some of it nobly, some of it by children in sheds, and by people who never came home to claim what was theirs. So, too good to be real turns out to be the wrong question. The country is real, all of it, the mountains and the vaults, the mercy and the silence, the show of hands in the square, and the 50 years it took to raise every hand. Go back one last time to the chalet with the flower boxes and the steel door in its basement. That door is the whole country held in a single object. A beautiful house above, a shelter for the worst of the world below. The Swiss have never seen the two as opposites. You keep the surface calm precisely so you can survive whatever comes for it. And you decide, quietly and together, and again every single year, exactly how much of yourself you are willing to spend to stay safe and stay rich and stay good. The only honest question left is the one the Swiss keep answering every year at the ballot and in the square. Not whether a place this good can last, but what it is willing to keep paying to stay that way. Thank you for watching. Until the next journey.